on. Good evening, everyone. I'm Paul Kunkelmuller. I'm the chair of the City of Groton Planning and Zoning Commission. I'd like to call the June 18th, 2024 meeting to order at 6:35. All right, roll call. So I am here. Ms. Bergeron is here. Boris is here. James is here. Mr. Jenkins is not here. Mrs. Lothrop is here. And Mr. Rusk is here. So 6. And I believe Mrs. Lothrop and Mr. James were confirmed
Yes.
by the commission last, correct? Correct. Now, the other thing that we had a resignation of the vice chair. According to the bylaws, we should replace him at the next regular meeting, which is tonight. It's Mr. Streeter's resignation. If that is an agenda item, we're going to just do that.
You can add it as an agenda item or just, it's a regular meeting, so you can add to the agenda.
All right, so I guess we'll, let's go ahead and do that. First thing up. We're gonna need to replace Mr. Streeter, who's resigned from the commission. And we still need to replace the vice chair. So are there any nominations for the floor for vice chair?
I nominate Robert Boris.
All right, Mr. Boris, is there a second?
I'll say.
All right. A motion and a second.
Just as a matter of discussion, you said that we elect officers that are normal July.
July.
This is a 1 month.
This is a one, yeah.
So if it doesn't suit you,
Yeah.
very honored.
Are you willing to serve? Mr. Boris?
Very, very grateful. Yes.
All right. All right, thank you. Is there any motions been made and seconded? Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right. All those in favor of approving Mr. Boris as the vice chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. Congratulations.
Sure.
All right, approval of minutes from the May 21st Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Does anybody have any changes? All right, is there a motion to approve? Right,
Second.
motion by Ms. Lothrop. Second by Mr. Rusk. All right. Now, does anybody have any changes? We're supposed to get a vote on the floor first. It's in that Robert's Rules of Order somewhere. All right, no changes. All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the May 21st, 2024 meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
All abstained. That's good.
Okay. Right. Okay, next item on our agenda is public hearing for site plan number 502, special permit number 474. This is for 18 Thames Street. It's a business office and accessory storage. This is for a 5-year extension of the site plan and special permit that were approved on 19th of June 2019. This is a applicant of Staines Leasing LLC. And I'm going to read the public hearing procedure, just so we've got everybody knows what we do, how we handle them, and then I'll ask Mr. Green
I'm sorry.
Mr. Green?
Yes, that's correct.
That's good. Okay. So I'll ask Mr. Green to present. So, as I mentioned, I am the chair of the City of Groton Planning and Zoning Commission. And I'd like to open the public hearing for special permit number 474, site plan number 50502. Purpose of the public hearing is to receive input from the applicant, proponents, opponents, and all interested parties or citizens who wish to comment on the aforementioned application. It is important to note that once this application was received by the commission, no member of the commission may comment on or discuss this application with any other member of the commission, the applicant or applicant's agent, member of the public or interested party, except during public hearing proceedings. Once the hearing is closed, commission members may only discuss this application to commission members during deliberations. This hearing is being recorded and minutes are being documented. Anyone wishing to speak, so do so from the microphone. Please state your name clearly, spelling your last name for the record, provide your address. Please speak slowly into the microphone and reintroduce yourself each time you speak. Commission uses the following procedure during public hearings. Each hearing will be introduced. The applicant or designated agent will present the application. The commission and staff will have the opportunity to ask questions or provide comments. The applicant will then have the opportunity to address staff and commission questions and comments. The chairman will then ask for public comments in the following order: comments in favor of the application, comments in opposition to the application, comments that are neither in favor or opposition to the application. Any questions to the applicant, staff, or commission shall be addressed to the chair. Chair will pose the questions or questions to the appropriate party or parties. Please limit public comments to how the application does or does not comply with land use regulations or the plan of conservation and development. The applicant will then have the opportunity to address public comments and questions. The commission and staff will be provided further opportunity to ask additional questions and offer further comments. These may be directed to the applicant or a member of the public who previously commented on or submitted information for the record. The applicant and members of the public will have one opportunity to respond to commission and staff questions or comments. The commission will then decide whether to close or continue the public hearing to a future date. Once the hearing is closed, the commission is unable to hear additional comments or accept exhibits or correspondence in favor, opposition, or with a neutral position on the application. The commission will then deliberate upon the application. Deliberations will occur in a public meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Deliberations will be posted on a meeting agenda, and the public is welcome to listen to the commission's discussions. Agendas are posted a minimum of 24 hours in advance of a regular or special meeting of the commission and are provided on the city clerk's website and at the city clerk's office. During deliberations, commission members will discuss the application with input from staff. The commission will take into consideration relevant testimony and information provided by the applicant and members of the public. Following deliberations, the commission will then vote on the application. Vote outcomes could be to approve with conditions, deny, or deny with prejudice. Are there any questions regarding these procedures before I open the public hearing? All right, no questions? For the record, I am opening the public hearing on site plan number 502, special permit number 474, Thames Valley Leasing LLC for 118 Thames Street, business office and accessory storage. Mr. Tom Green is presenting. So, Mr. Green.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Zoning Commission, for your public service. So, 18 Thames is a two-story brick structure. We are looking, it's an existing building. It has been there since, I think, around 1933. It was a former police station. And we're looking to renovate the building, and the business use would be a combination of servicing of equipment and office space with some storage. So the second floor of the said building will be all office. And the first floor will be more or less split. The one side of the building will be for services, while the other side will be for storage and shipment of goods. And I think we have a total of 26 parking spaces is what the plan shows at memory serves. What's a special permit for that? Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. The original plans that you have and the renewal has not changed. There are no changes whatsoever to this renewal. It is staying as existing, so there are no changes in the paperwork as far as I know, aside from the date.
All right, so just for, there's only two of us who are currently on the commission who were here in 2019, so for the benefit of the other commissioners, could you give a brief outline of the project and what other kind of changes you're gonna be making to the site? And how we're gonna deal with the parking, because I think it's based on the calculation where the green space is short in the actual problem. So you want to just walk us through that project that you're looking at?
I'll do the best that I can, Chairman. I am not the engineer. I guess I should have brought the engineer for that. But so this is a really tight lot. I believe it's the exact square footage, but so we ended up having to have a special permit for parking because of the limited space that we had here. So I'm not exactly sure specifically, but as far as, may I ask, what specifics would you like to know?
Well, like I said, only two of us who are here tonight were on the commission at the time of 2019.
Okay.
So you just give us a high level, give other commissioners a high level introduction to the project. You know, what the issues, I mean, we can go through what there were three requests to modify the parking requirements. One of those was reduction. The size of the spaces, and the other had to do with I believe had to be handled by the city engineer. Had to do with stormwater runoff.
Yes, we did have an engineer that went through stormwater runoff. And then I know there was also a truck terminal that we had to plan for as well, in order that there was enough room to turn around for that truck and back into the space here. Yeah, we have on-site parking of 21 spaces and off-site 8 spaces for a total of 29 spaces. As far as runoff, I think it was pretty simple. I think
Yeah, the slightly less imposing service, I think, surface on the new application, on the new layout. A reduction of 250 square feet or something.
okay.
So there was, as I recall reading through this to refresh my memory, there's slightly less.
Yeah, when it comes to that extra entrance fee closed.
Yes, that's correct.
That's
Yes,
the other
I forgot about that.
And there was I think there was an addition of a grade by the the main entrance. And, the precast concrete drywall. So
Yes, that's correct. Red filter fabric, yes. And we had some landscaping that we were going to do. Specifically out front where we had the curb cut, and then we were going to replace the sidewalk in the front there with the original concrete brick that they had used. On the stone wall that we have out in the front there, the existing stone wall, I think the idea was that we were going to put some nice bushes on top of that stone wall. And still maintain that nice look that they had when they designed it as a police station many years ago. There's no building footprint extension anywhere. Everything is staying within the footprint. There's no specific landscaping aside from around the dumpster area where we'll have the bushes located around it and the fence.
where is the dumpster gonna go?
I believe it's on the right side here. It says 8AA. I think that's the spot 44, page 4. Sheet number 4/6.
The total line 44 on the right side of the
The
site.
would be the logical place for it.
Yeah,
Not-
It was identified on one page, maybe on application or something. How about the front story? Are we the point where we're asking questions?
Sure, go ahead.
I think the application talked about use of the third story.
yes, that's
Is that
correct.
revision?
I think there are future plans to use the third story for more office space. I don't think that's something we're gonna do at this time, but there is a third story. It's more or less an attic right now, and I think most of the utilities will go up there for HVAC and such. Okay. Yeah.
I just wasn't aware that space was up there. Or if this was part of the application was talking about raising the roof by a story
No, we're not doing that. That it is existing. There was a shooting range
in the attic.
in the attic, yeah. So.
They'll usually put those in the basement. And the 8 off-street parking places are across the street.
That is correct, yes.
Across the street on a different property, how does that work?
Yeah, you can do that. You can lease it within a certain number of feet.
Well, there's street park
Yeah.
across the street.
It is on the street.
It's on the street, if it was across.
Oh, just, there are 8 of them there.
Right in front of Spicer, there is on-street parking. The street is wide enough and that is.
It's generally public parking. So that is. You can't keep someone else from parking there. So it actually. That actually doesn't count. There, I have not seen any evidence in the file of an agreement with the city where it's marked as, parking for 8th and Main Street only.
That's correct. I think in the previous approval, the commission had decided that it was acceptable to count those spaces and once they needed the project. But yeah, I think that's.
If this
correct.
was something that wasn't coming back after approval, I think we just probably have additional discussion on it, but because it was approved. It's just carrying over an existing approval that could have been built within the last 5 minutes or.
In the document, there's only 10 to 15 employees expected.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so that seems like a,
Yeah, I think we were just looking to the future. If there were more hires, that we would have at least extra space. And Spicer, of course, they have a massive parking lot that's hardly used on that side as well. So I think we were planning on, if we had to, work out some kind of deal with them, so.
All right, any other, staff comments, wasn't anything?
Again, because this is just an application to carry over what was approved a few years ago. The reliance on that approval without having that major changes in the area, I think is fine. Again, if this were a brand new proposal and we'd be looking at things like the existing parking, what was necessary. A keener eye toward it, but because it was already approved, it's. I don't see a problem with continuing it, particularly with the understanding the basis of trust really are not yours to count.
Questions or comments from commissioners? Ms. Bergeron?
Can I just ask what type of servicing?
Yeah, so we service laboratory equipment, typically, laboratory equipment.
Other questions or comments, commissioners?
it's what you're storing also.
Yeah, so basically what happens with the services, we'll service the machines and then they'll go into the storage area until they're set and ready to take back to the customer. Thank you.
But none of those activities are going on now, is that correct? Or,
Not at that site, no, at another site, yeah.
other questions or comments?
So you had done the special permit initially in 2019, that's correct?
Yes.
Is there any particular, and no work has been done on it since getting that permit, is there any particular reason why that's stalled?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. So we did gut the building. The building was gutted. We ran the undergrounds for the electric. And then COVID after that.
Thank you.
There were also some, there were a few conditions of approval. There were some conditions of approval, correct? And those would still, if we extend this, those conditions would still be in place.
Correct.
And in terms of the lighting plan and all those kind of things, plantings, that's all, it's all gonna be
As
the
it was
same,
approved.
so it's.
So motion should say as approved in 2019.
Extend this.
For 5 years.
Approve extension. Yes. Prior. June 2019.
Do you know specifically what the conditions of approval were?
Yeah, so they're actually around the first page, there's a letter from me to. Yeah, I'm checking it.
Correct.
And the conditions of approval are there. It talks about the alley on the north side, the remaining driveway, catch basin, stone mulch ground cover, and letter of approval and notion of conditions to be identified. So I think most of that is included in the lines we have. Right. All right. Other questions or comments from anyone? All right, is there a motion to approve extending?
Do you want to ask?
Oh, yeah, I just thought it'd be a good idea, but then you put all in your. Anyone, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Anyone opposed to the application? Anyone with no position on the application? Okay. All
I move that we close the public hearing.
right,
I'll second.
motion from Mr. Ross, a second from Mr. James to close the public hearing. All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, all those in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so open the public hearing and include 5056. All right, now,
Who's the second?
all right, so deliberations. So we're basically the issue before us is to grant a 5-year extension to the existing site plan and special permit, but they have new numbers, not correct, Leslie, so we have to reference those in the approval.
They should not.
They say 502 and 474. The original application. Looking at motion to approve site plan number 4770, special permit number 462. On the notice of approval that went to.
What would be the reason to give the new numbers?
I don't know. It would make sense to me that they would have the same number, but
I don't know the process. I just curious.
yeah, I don't know if it's a.
I would make a motion for the original numbers also, and then do it also known as,
Okay.
just for particular,
Make sure you've got everything covered.
yeah.
So a motion to approve site plan number 50502, special permit number 474, also known as. Site plan application number 470 and special permit number 462 that was approved on 19 June 2019. All right, a motion to approve from Mr. James. Is there a second? Mr. Boris? All right, is there any discussion on the motion?
Seen a little progress on the site, so the precast dry wells staged. Excited to see that project's got reinvigorated, so.
It's got some legs. All right. Other discussion?
Glad they're doing sidewalk.
Is that on your walking path? All right,
So it would be extended for 5 years from today.
yes. I don't think that would make sense, but well, yeah, but it's 1 day before the 5-year approval, so. Your timing is almost perfect.
I know, it's close.
So that takes us to June 18th, 2020.
This is being June 17th.
June 17th.
So everybody clear on the motion now is to got all the new numbers and the old numbers. And you're. We need to add language to include the. Conditions from the last one. What is that
Your
covered?
motion should include that it be, that include the motion, that all conditions as may have been approved at the original approval. And if there's anything since then, I don't believe that there is, but
Try again. Propose a motion. So the motion will be to approve site plan number 502, special permit number 474, also known as site plan number, I'm sorry. Also known as site plan number 470, special permit number 462. To include all conditions included in the original approval or any new conditions
this may have been
which may have been added,
added or active as an amendment.
okay? Added or acted or added as an amendment. And that approval would be effective on 18 June of 2024 for 5 years. So that would be through 17 June of 2029. How's that? That makes. Get that? Okay.
I'll make a motion as you say, I'm not gonna try.
Second time, support is good for that, okay. All right, any further discussion on the revised motion? Right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right. 6-0-0. Good luck.
Great, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, regular meeting, anything?
So I've made the changes from last week. I didn't distribute, I figured we'd go through, continue on today. And then I'll put those in and then I will send them back out.
All right. So that brings us to ongoing business, which is discussion of possible zoning regulation amendments. So we got through the first 10 pages, right, pretty much. And we were working on page 11. And we had there were some comments about under the residential density about what the potential is for that. We have 60 units per acre, but the actual potential would be with all the other, the restrictions on lot coverage and all those kind of things.
And so I did look at all of those. I looked at this entire list. Which of course will print out for me, so, but they were changed based upon our conversation. The GC was changed to word parcel is removed and is changed to 24 units per acre. We've been talking about 12. What I would like to do when we go back through all of this is to have diagrams so that we can actually see what this all looks like when it's laid out. Based on floors and reasonably sized units. So instead of going through the minutia of that, now I think moving on to the parking section may make the most sense.
Okay. I guess in terms of the, there were a couple of other issues that had come up. Just to.
Yeah.
Recap, so Wherever we refer to stores, I think we're gonna add the word correct, so that we.
I did change the language in there to say that all building heights are measured in feet and that the stories are nominal. And I did take out the diagrams that look like this, at least for now. As I said, there's a whole other program that has to get changed in. That's all done in the Adobe suites. So everything that I could change in Microsoft, I did.
Okay.
And I had the notes on it. So,
All right, and there was a question about secondary building max height.
yes, and what I did look at was adding the documentation on for the ADUs as we discussed.
Right.
And letting, but distinguishing between the secondary buildings. ADUs now, in the case of, and actually I wanted to come back to this and ask you about it. Secondary buildings in the case of apartment complexes, for instance, could be. It could be a pool house, it could be local, the leasing office, things like that. But outbuildings, would be more like sheds and things that don't necessarily have people living in them, or it's more can be more storage. Anyway, I wanted to get a little bit of clarity on how you all felt about that.
So the outbuildings, that would be sheds or things like that.
Could be garages.
Okay, so garages, all right, so. With sheds, would they often specify height restrictions on shed? You said,
I think that you want to do that.
You think that we want to give that level of detail based on the purpose of the building before we set just a secondary building max height?
When we were talking about it last week, some of our concerns were based on how we use the buildings, and then also based on whether there's an additional building above the garage. But also that we had it set at the same max height for all zoning, even though the max height of the principal structures was changing. Would we want to consider doing a percentage height so that they're all the same relationship between the buildings? But they're not, but then we're not getting into that very specific usage, trying to get back to that form base.
The most form-based codes that I've worked with do set specific heights. They're relative to the stories we've been talking about, so that, for instance, allowing ADUs to be only one story, or allowing them to be 2 stories. And it's more that you want them to be shorter than the primary building. And I think that it's clearer to do it with numbers than percentage. I'll think about that, because I could not.
I mean, we could do the math, it could be, if it's 75%, then it would be roughly 22 feet for the 35.
Right, the other thing is to.
Get a 55-foot outbuilding on a 75-foot structure.
Yeah.
Right, shed.
And the other thing is, these are gonna change, the uses are likely to change over time. I can see developer coming in, developing certain number of units with a certain number of square feet of outbuilding as a secondary building. And then and I actually had this happen once. The place I worked before, we had form-based code. Where it was a 55 and over housing complex, and they said, one of the units is going to be for a full-time nurse, For the office, and then they came back and, yeah, well, 55 turns out to not be quite as old as we thought it was, and we don't really need a full-time nurse, and, so attaching it to uses tends to get, it's not how I would recommend it. I would recommend it.
I recommend 25 feet. 25 feet allows for a maximum height that's shorter than a 35-foot building. It allows you to put an ADU above a garage. It allows you to have a full house next to your apartment complex or a leasing office that's 2 stories of office space. And beyond that, it's a single family home with a very nice garage. I can only give them a thumbs up.
Well, in general, we're expecting a lot of single family home here, right? So I think it's gonna be,
Would we consider updating the garage a secondary building if it's a big apartment?
Depends on where is it a standalone parking garage, then it would be. And then, but if it was, underneath the building, it would be part of the primary.
So if we set 25-foot threshold and someone came in with a special permit and wanted to build, a 4-story parking garage adjacent to an apartment complex, we could talk about it in those terms as a variance to the 25-foot max height. Would we have the latitude to allow such a structure even if we set 25 feet?
A variance would have to go through the ZBA. What you could do is change the regulations to set a height for a parking garage.
We could do a text amendment at that
Yep.
time on behalf of that property to specify the
You have to do
outbuilding
it
use,
for the
special
zone.
outbuilding use.
Yeah, for the zone.
all right, so is 25 feet sound like a reasonable number to use? All right, that's good. That's good.
So that's the secondary buildings.
Right. Then we had those questions about setbacks too. Right?
And those I did change. Again, we don't have a copy of them. Print out before. As soon as we get through the other stuff tonight, I'll get complete package to. all of you.
All right, and then the secondary setbacks, we didn't get that far. Those as well. And also the building massing, did you make any changes there?
Building massing, I did. I basically combined those bottom 2 rows so that there is one number for a maximum percentage of impervious surface. So if you want to have a tiny house with a big parking lot, it's not what we're looking for, but you could do that. But it would all be one number because the purpose of it is primarily environmental. We're looking to not have more than or less than certain. So you try and get that equalized throughout the city at some point.
So which way did you go?
I went with the larger numbers because we're trying to get increased number I got at the bottom row. Because we're trying to get density, and for the density, we not only need the room to build, but we also need the room to.
This also encourages people to build parking at the bottom.
Yeah.
So not having.
So that was the rationale. I don't think 25% would be. I don't think that's a reasonable amount for what we're looking to to do.
Building coverage, I thought you were talking about, are you talking about the total impervious lot coverage at 80?
For, that's for the GCR 75.
Yeah, so you're saying you use 60, 60, 70, 88, and
Yes.
you also use that for max percent building coverage.
Just take out the maximum building coverage. I just took that piece out so that it's, you have a parcel that's this big.
Yep.
60% of it can be impervious, which means
Building or otherwise.
40, right,
Okay, so you say for the 60, 60, 70, 80.
yes,
All right. And you broke out ADUs, you talked about that. Anything else? Any questions from, what's gonna be, one thing I wanted to bring up was, we had talked about, I mean, we talked about needing to add a section. Approved uses in the GCRs, right?
yes,
And one of the things that is currently allowed in the GC zone is single family homes. My question is, do you want to allow single family homes in the GCR section, trying to get more density?
there are a couple of places where we have them
In the GC, in one of the GCR zones?
in the. Yeah, because it's the 35.
Okay.
And so in order to keep those from being considered pre-existing non-conforming and becoming difficult to refinance and the other issues that go along with that, I kept the single family, added the duplex. So we could have two family as well. And then also it's basically allowing one, two, whatever the maximum is for the density.
So you can do that only for the, just for the GCR 35, or you can do that for the 50 to 50, 75 and 75?
I want to go back and double check where the single family ones are. I
So
think they're in just the 35.
I'm not, I don't want to make anybody non-conforming, but I think it's good to take out the ability to this. Mr. Russ pointed out last week, you know, someone putting a single family home on a 2-acre lot,
We want to protect.
or more, you know, more dense residential.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, so. Parking. Page 17, right?
Yes,
I want a lot of to make it back in position. Single family home.
Get your eye on it.
I have a clarification question real quick. I had asked the question last meeting, but I'm not sure if it got totally answered. For parking in a setback, are we allowing parking within a setback, or does it have to be outside of that setback?
the setback generally does not allow parking, except that there's language in here about allowing minimal front parking in the front, which would be for handicap spaces or drop off. And that actually wouldn't, it probably wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be within, the setbacks tend to be fairly small. But I would say when we go through this diagrammatically, we'll make sure to look at that. But that's a great question.
All right. Okay, so parking. Lots of changes there. Walk us through what's going on. What is it?
So. Yeah, not as many as I wanted. I did incorporate the changes that we made for that were imposed by the state that you all voted on for a couple of months ago, I guess.
Right.
So those have been incorporated. That was basically the only change that I made in the chart. Okay, it's. And I did that because I would like to get away from the very highly specific descriptions in here. But I didn't want to change it before you all had said, yeah, let's go that way. One of the reasons that I want that it would be helpful to be able to at least classify these uses if we don't change them. Is that when you get to the shared parking factor on page 21, which I will be glad to walk everybody through how to do this. I mean, there are a couple of examples there. I have done this in other places. I can tell you that it works. But you don't take my word for it. I'll walk everybody through it, but I think I don't want to spend a lot of time on how do you figure out shared parking unless y'all are looking into it tonight. I did change the language on the microbrewery. Thank you, Cameron, those changes. What I didn't do was double check the, I didn't forget it, was to double check whether the language for that became the last use in the primary uses, so that it went right into the accessory uses. I didn't forget it, but, and I may have done it, but it's gone over a few days. Just to quickly explain the shared parking factor, it's based on the fact that there are people that use parking spaces generally more at night and on the weekends than they do during the day. And if you have retail space in conjunction with living space, allowing those parking spaces to do double duty. So you don't always have an assigned space for an apartment that nobody else can use ever. This has been used, and this particular chart has been used in lots of places around the country. So I do feel pretty comfortable with incorporating.
I have one question.
Yep.
Under 7.1.3, that housing for elderly, only 75 spaces per dwelling unit. There any particular reason why it's not a full space for dwelling unit housing for elderly? I don't know what 0.75 per car it looks like.
Some of those little tin cans. It is what was there. This is, we are all inheriting that number right now.
You would multiply the amount of people by 1.75.
Right.
Yeah, but it doesn't always equal a round number, would it? I didn't do the math.
Right, then you just round either up or down, depending upon where you fall.
It just doesn't say that.
I think elsewhere in the regulations, it does say that
Correct.
somewhere, so
Yeah, it's
it's
like
like a general,
any calculation resulting in a fraction shall be rounded to the nearest number.
Sure.
So yeah, so if it's like you need 0.1 spaces, well, actually, full space.
right,
That's, or at least that's how it's written.
that's,
It's a lower number because we're expecting that type of housing to have fewer dollars.
yes.
So, anybody have any questions or comments on that parking section?
I'm the first one to say that a lot of these numbers are as they are, as they're set for very specific uses may be less than optimal. And I'm happy to do the research on what you would need, what people who have thought about this since the pre would put in there and massage those to be. I don't want to jump the gun on stuff without,
So
I want us all to be going at the same pace here.
so what we have here, these are the current requirements
Yes,
in table.
yes.
So do you have any, big recommendations for, you think we should, would it make sense to change them? Is that, how do you want it,
What I think makes the most sense is to try and break them out into more generalized uses rather than the highly specific uses that we had in, to specify uses for, obviously, like the brewery, just as an example. To specify that over a restaurant that has a bar is, I think, not helpful. I think things like that should be combined and they should be, to the extent possible, combine them into the different, on page 21, above the shared parking factor chart. It lists residential, lodging, office, retail, civic, and other. To the extent that things can get put into those categories, I think that would be most helpful. It also makes using the shared parking factor mechanism much easier.
For what it's worth, I tend to agree with that. I mean, these would be investors or businesses that are going to build facilities that they figure, will be profitable to run, so that are not, we don't need to over-regulate that and dictate it specifically, but having a broad perimeter sort of protects the community, it seems, and I think that's a great approach.
all right? Other questions, other comments?
So are you suggesting that we get away from this chart that has everything listed and go with?
And
Yes.
specifically, what I would suggest is condensing the chart as much as possible and then assigning of the 6 functions, assigning a function to each of those. So for instance, instead of having, we'd still break out, for instance, what are the requirements for residential? Okay, and that would be under residential, but you wouldn't have 8 million different kinds. For instance, not having, it would actually take care of the issue that Cameron raised, where if it's just in general, if it's a studio or a 1-bedroom, following state legislation, you would have a requirement of 1 space. And if it was 2 or more, you'd have a requirement of 2 spaces.
So you're thinking about kind of flipping the way we list the required spaces. Apart from residential, for everything else, you go 1 space per 1,000 square feet, these applications, 2 spaces, these applications. And then just making those lists kind of comprehensive
And what it also does is you can use these numbers back and forth so that you can establish, and it's in the examples, you can find out how much parking you can fit on a site, which would tell you how many square feet your building would be. I will tell you right now, in places that I've worked where I've instituted this, it's taken a while for other staff to figure out how to do it. So, I was always the one doing it, and I can tell you that it works. But the math, if you're not used to doing that, could feel a little bit like you know, mental calisthenics. But it does work. And that's why I put the examples in here. I developed those so that, you know, if I don't come back from being a few days, off for a few days, there's somebody else who can look at it and say, oh, I get it now.
So, for example, on the chart on page 21, we added food and beverage use, for example, because that has more intensive parking requirements than anything else on the list. Would that
We
be
could
something-
do that.
That'd be something that would make sense to break out as a separate category.
We could do that, and what that.
Can I make kind of a general comment? I think that we would be serving the interest of the folks that we've heard from directly and indirectly best. If we design these regulations to require more parking than less parking. And I say that because of all the concerns about the load on the surrounding neighborhood. And if we always round down the number of spaces that must be provided in these, then we are almost by nature asking for overflow into the street and into other streets just for existing use of, you know, potential development. I think that we have big parcels and we've allowed for a much increased density and higher buildings. And I think somewhere in there we've got to make an allowance for a requirement for enough spaces to accommodate the density that's going in. I think that there should be no net impact on parking off of those parcels from what we already have right now.
The state law actually does not, for residential only, does not allow us to require more than one space for studio and one bedroom. Now, and 2 spaces for 2 bedrooms. That's only for the residential. And then the shared parking helps with that. I don't know what that one is. With the shared parking factor, you can only use 2 uses. This only works with the highest, with. Says to use the highest 2, but you can't factor 3 uses, 3 functions. It doesn't work anymore. So it's for the 2, you use the 2, even if you have 3 uses. I understand what you're saying. And I think that there are advantages to on-street parking. And there's a way we can put language in here that says that on-street parking that's directly adjacent, not across the street, not down the street, not around the corner, but directly adjacent to the parcel can be counted toward that parking. On-street parking does a few things. Most importantly, it actually slows traffic down.
I fully understand that. I'm just saying there is not a lot of on-street parking available.
Agreed, then it doesn't count.
In these areas.
Right. So I don't want to get to a situation where we've allowed 60 dwelling units on an acre parcel. And we've somehow, because of fuzzy math, allowed for 42 parking spaces and shared parking elsewhere. Where the same elsewhere is being shared by other 1 acre parcels adjacent. And now we've got this massive overcrowding parking problem.
Yeah, actually can't do that. I understand. And I am very sympathetic. This is the first place I have ever worked where it's not overparked. Most places you have empty parking spaces year round. And so I'm very conscious of that, and we can look at these numbers closely when we. Yeah, but I'm not opposed to having more parking spaces. I think that. Just don't want to. not be consistent with state statute for residential. I mean,
I got it.
like, I'm not opposed to it, I'm just, it would be nice to have it in the form of a parking garage or underground parking as opposed to. So all surface parking.
I fully agree, and I think that as long as we require the spaces, that would drive the development, you know, in bigger buildings to go underground parking. Which accomplishes, you know, checks more of the boxes that we want to check. In the first place. And just, you know, once we start allowing for greater density in this area, you can't force all the parking on the street.
I mean, just our hands are tied, by its statutory limitations of the state.
And if you adopt language that only allows. On-street parking to count that is directly adjacent on the front, for instance, on Bridge
Front.
Street. It's
Sure.
the frontage.
I tend to agree with your point. I think there's some mitigating factors there. I don't think anyone's gonna develop a building that doesn't have, you know, adequate parking for them to market it. But if they do try to exploit it a little bit, I think, you know, you could do resident only parking in certain areas. The city can do some sort of ordinance based to contain the spillover, but
And
you
we're
know,
looking at
it's
that.
definitely something.
We have that to, you know, within an envelope away from our largest employer. And I can tell you that without daily enforcement, it is.
Well,
Not with the papers, right?
if you get enough revenue to hire
Yeah.
some good enforcement, if somebody put a good sized development in there, I think that the city would be, it would be incumbent on them to make sure the residents are protected, so it's a good point. But, and like I said, for my own thinking that over. The thing that made me feel a little more comfortable about it is the economic driver. Is not likely to be a huge investment by a developer building something that isn't leasable because there's not, you know, the market isn't, if people don't have a place to put their cars, and we're trying to promote some walkability, so it's a fine line between the two, but it's a good point to constantly be aware of this. It's, you know, kind of key to architecture in America, we're designing around cars, right? So.
I'm not sure that those people are thinking quite about the purpose of this development from the
Those people are.
the public, some of the people in the public who are afraid of density. The walkable, bikeable side of this, just this small area, should encourage people to walk to the restaurant that's down below their apartment. So maybe that restaurant doesn't need a thing, because they're being patronized by the 3 apartment buildings that are right next to them. Right, there will be a lot of shared work play. So hopefully in this area, different from EB. It won't be such a big.
But if all 4 spaces on the frontage in front of the apartment building are always taken up by overnight resident parking, you know, and you have the first floor quick stop or something, it just won't get patronized if there's never any place to park there. You know what I mean? If we drive, you know, the most parking on the parcel that we can legally, then it forces the developer to figure it out, you know, and just, you know, make the arrangement such that you accommodate the residents, accommodate parking for the business, and don't make that accommodation be on the back of, you know, the adjacent street, what little on-street parking there is, or folks parking overnight around the corner on a different residential street, just because there's not enough parking for it. You know, I get whatever we're held to by law, I got it. I'm just saying, don't round down in favor of the development, because then lazy development won't look for the solutions on how to get more parking spaces. And oh, you know what, we're at a threshold. It behooves us to put them underground. You know, they won't make that decision unless we bribe them with the regulation. I think that's part of the point. These changes.
Yeah, the impervious change, I think is a huge driver for that will encourage bigger buildings. parking we need. But also, there have been a lot of studies done that actually you have an area that you can make a pedestrian zone. Those areas are patronized more, the businesses make more money, because people are encouraged to and go slowly and enjoy the area, and they step into a business if they want that. They get to know the owners, so that is the type of community we can foster in this location. So we would hope that the businesses that do come in are looking to be patronized by the surrounding area, right? We really want those people who aren't looking for the people who are driving from out of, maybe from Rhode Island to stop by once in a while. Like, we want Groton businesses to serve Groton.
When we did the discussions on Five Corners, that was one of the things that we had brought up was if you have that many people in one location, they're gonna get out and walk around, and hopefully it would develop that area to have some delis or some, cafes where you could sit outside and talk to people and see the people that walk by and live in the apartment building with you. So it is that concept of, it's more of a community as opposed to the people from Rhode Island coming in. We did find that in that situation, that doesn't mean it's gonna happen in all situations. There was more than sufficient parking. And I think that goes to Bob's idea of, you want people to move into your apartments, you're going to make sure that your apartments are more accommodating than the guy next door who has parking. So part of that, I think we'll probably have more of an issue with parking when it comes to the small restaurants. And the people who are building the apartment complexes, I see them providing parking. Otherwise, why would I want to live there? If I have to drive around the neighborhood like New York City and then get up in the morning and change sides. It's not the community that we have.
One thing that I do want to make clear is if none of this, these are all in here as minimums, so nothing precludes a developer from building more. For better or worse. There's so the developer could put more in, and I think that we are acutely aware of, when I lived in DC for a year and I was working there, I took the metro to work, which was wonderful, but I had my car there. I needed a place to store my car during the week. Even though I was only using it on weekends. So I still needed that space. And I probably would not have rented where I did had I not had that. So I do think that I think Bob makes a good point about developers they're going to build to the market. The other thing is, if we find them, what we may find is that the figuring this out backwards from how we think about it initially, which is, I'm gonna build a building this big, I need this much parking. If we run the numbers with the second example where it figures out, where basically it figures out how much parking you can have, which then tells you how big your building is, which is the inverse of how we're all used to doing it. We get to look at two different answers to the same parcel and work with a developer to massage the right answer out of that. It'll be based upon the carrying capacity of the land.
So for the residential spaces, there's a maximum we can require, correct, based on. state
Yes, but a
statute.
developer can build more.
Could build more, but I mean, we can't require any more than the state says, which is one per studio, one bedroom, and two bedrooms, correct?
Or more, right?
Two or more.
That's only for residential, correct?
Right, it's only residential.
Correct. Well, to Jason's point, I think, as a general statement, I think it's important, because when we have businesses and stuff moving in here, they're not just going to be looking at the new residential that's moved in, they're gonna see Pfizer and EV and they're gonna say, ooh, also customers, right? And so beyond enough parking for the people living nearby, we should also think about people coming from EV and leaving and wanting to stop by on the way, or coming from Pfizer and wanting to stop by on the way, right? So I think it's a bit more of a general statement than just looking at increasing residential that is state statute requiring we can. But considering how much we should put for restaurants and for businesses going in, especially mixed use, right? Because tell me if I'm wrong reading the shared parking diagram. Retail is the last one listed, and it says that when factories are shared, you're gonna default to the bottom one, right? And so we just have to be careful with how we balance residential and retail being near each other.
It's not that you default to the bottom one, you default to the lowest one. So, if it was lodging and retail. Okay. For those two, you would use the 1.3.
Correct.
But if you had lodging and retail and office, you would use the higher density. So you're using
It's not the text box.
when three functions share parking, the lowest shared parking value should, sorry, let's see. When you use the lower number, you get a higher number of required parking.
Because this is a multiplication factor. Shoot.
So a lower number on this chart needs more parking.
It's closer to a 1-to-1, if it's 1 to 1.5.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got, residential piece, we're kind of locked in on, can't do, so we don't have a whole lot of it. I gotta. I don't think we want to require less than the state allows us to, right? Because then we do risk doing exactly what Jason said, and that's putting, forcing people to the street, which we.
The workforce is growing, the parking spaces are finite. The workforce parking is growing onto city streets as we speak, right? It's only going to get worse.
So the employer's not gonna do anything about
And
it.
if we increase parking density at the north end of the city beyond capacity of parking spaces, because we allow, then we're just going to create a parking lot, and that defeats all the. Thank you.
And even if there were interesting reasons to do that, I don't think there's an appetite in the community to do that, to experiment like that by creating less parking.
But I think if you're looking at the residential units, they're going to, they're not gonna park on the street, they're either gonna park their car in the garage at the apartment complex and walk to work, because they don't wanna deal. All of that overflow of parking is EVs parking, not these residentials. So if anything, having the residentials will reduce the amount of parking that EV takes up, because. I'm sorry?
You hope so.
That's all we can do. I mean, you'd like to think, like when we got into the roads being used more, we'd like to think that if people are living in Groton, the roads aren't gonna be used as much. The off-street parking isn't gonna be used as much, because you'll leave your car there at your apartment and walk, because it's not that far, as opposed to fighting, looking for a parking space. But it's really an EV issue, not an apartment issue.
The only other interesting wrinkle residentially is maybe putting it, we discussing putting a maximum on. I think that there was, I don't remember all the discussion about Five Corners, but I think there was some opposition that they were going too much. That I think there were some commissioners at the time that were opposed to the fact that, And I'm not, I don't wanna wrap around the pole here, I think we're in a good place, you know, we shouldn't necessarily. The appetite in the community isn't to get aggressive right down on this stuff, but, there's some good arguments to
Be cognizant.
putting maximums on residential. But anyway,
There, I think that one of the things to remember is that every site is supposed to carry its own parking. So if you have a parcel that has 3 apartment buildings on it, let's say they have 60 units altogether. They need to carry the amount of parking that they need, not just for those residential units, but any mixed use. They need to, whether we use the shared parking or not, they need to carry that either on their own parcel, or if we put something in that says that they can lease space for 25 years or whatever on a parcel that's, 300 feet away.
That's what I'm looking to avoid. If you want to put
So then we
60
don't put it
62
in.
bedroom units, you need 120 spaces. If you want a restaurant, you gotta have 30 more spaces. It needs to be on that parcel. You can't count on Bridge Street, Church Street, Broad Street to be your parking lot for overflow. That's what I'm concerned about. I don't want to be a party to using fuzzy math to allow this to become, incredibly parking dense and defeat the purpose.
I don't think any of us want to do that, but like when you mention restaurants. If somebody puts a restaurant in on Main Street, there's no parking. For it. I mean, just look at Paul's Pasta.
100% agree.
So are we gonna say restaurants can't come to Main Street?
well, and remember the model, look at Mystic. I mean, I have 2 teenage daughters, I go to SIP all the time, there's no parking to SIP, right? And we would love to have that kind of an anchor here to revitalize Main Street, so. I do understand Jason's point, but I think, the objective is to sort of put this stuff out there and sort of see if we can't incubate some development here. If we start to have people, abuse parking and start to park on Groton Bank, then the city needs to hire some enforcement officers with the new tax revenue from the development and put residents only parking in there. I mean, that'd be a good problem to have. That we have the money and the economic development to do that. I mean, so I it's a good point, but.
No,
this
I
is
don't
why
think
it's
there's
hard.
any parcel that has enough frontage to hold anything
Right.
more than, that's not gonna be the determining factor, and so beyond that, they're gonna have to have their parking on their parcel. That, and we've required.
So we have to set adequate requirements so that's how it works out. Right?
Yeah.
We have to set the requirements so that, by and large, there's enough parking on the site for all people who are maybe on a, the Patriots are playing at the Super Bowl, there's like extra people at the establishment, and there may be some overflow on an occasion like that, but we don't want that happening on a daily basis, right? It's,
Definitely something we all want to pay attention to.
We have one chance to set the regulations.
yeah, no, so it's,
If we end up with a business that draws so much attention that people are willing to trade paint in the parking lot to, and park miles away to walk to get there, that's a good problem to have. We're not there yet.
But we can support that type of development, the type of development this has, where it's dense and it's a walkable, person friendly place, like I don't like driving through there. Right, if I'm thinking about going to Stonington, like I don't drive through Mystic, but when I wanna go to Mystic, I get out of my car and I walk and I go to multiple stores. And that's what other people.
Key words, you get out of your car. Where is that car? Get out of it.
Well, it depends, sometimes I walk ways,
Right, from the residential street where you parked it.
sometimes, yeah, but there's no one else parking there, and residential streets are much safer if there's cars parked on either side. Which I live on a residential street, well, it's not necessarily, but it's a street with on-street parking on both sides. But oftentimes there's no parking on it, on either side, and people shoot down the road. And when everyone's parked and there's a baseball game, then people slow down, it's safe to pass, like safer distance. So I personally think that shared parking is a good way to balance that, where you have, say, the baseball field, right, which have huge parking lots. Well, it's not used for most of the winter, and it's not used for most of the daytime during the middle of the week. It's used on the weekends and when the farmers markets. So that's a good opportunity for some other business that maybe needs daytime clients to use that park. So I see the shared coming from that perspective, where we have these existing or other parking lots that aren't being utilized. The churches, we have a lot of churches in on the
Just did that, where one of the churches was renting parking,
Sacred Heart. I don't think they ended up renting it. I think they ended up
just like.
painting an area, numbering the spaces and allowing it free.
Whatever, I mean,
But we,
but somehow they're allowing you folks to park there, so, you know.
an opportunity to city to take all the less. City parking lot.
All right, so how do we want to move forward here on parking? We want to try to set up the categories and then come up with some numbers, or?
Yeah, why don't I try and move this forward another step and we'll take a look at it this time.
Okay, so you've got sort
I-
of input here that
yeah.
we need to be
Yeah.
careful. We don't want to require too much, but we certainly don't want to require too,
Absolutely.
because we don't want to, because residents will be concerned about park establishments.
Understood.
Because everyone just, Paul's pasta is the example.
It's also the exception.
We go to the public, we can say, Leslie. All the workers.
She's a professional.
We got this process include encouraging underground development, like we brought up, parking. Cause you brought up Five Corners and I remember that project. They purchased a separate lot and that was just for parking. And I think especially in that area, it's like it's already a sea of parking, so. Are we allowed to encourage that within the regulations or is that something? Shy.
The limitation, generally speaking, is the height of the structure. So if they were to go underground, most of that is ledge, which makes it difficult to go underground. But welcome to 9-dimensional chess. So parking, we want to encourage parking to be in the back. We want to encourage any and all curb cuts to be narrow so that they get taken at a slower speed. To the extent that they could be one way, that helps with that a lot, and having buildings closer to the edges of those driveways. Allowing, I can't think of a parcel that would have more than 8 at the most on-street parking right in front. Like norms or where pride used to be that that stretch is, those are long, narrow parcels, but I don't think you could put more than, and I think 8's maybe high, but just better to err on the higher side, and we can measure, That's
even so, you have a commercial space with all of its parking, say for 2 or 3 on-street spaces in front of it. Each of those commercial spaces has got to rely on somebody else's parking. For all of
Yeah.
their patrons. And to the point where there were fisticuffs, over the Norms parking lot, shared daytime, nighttime use, was begrudgingly done, and most of the overflow was across the street in front of other businesses, so.
what we know is that the parking is not working there right now. So by building and we can force more, we can have it so that on-street parking is left, we don't have to count that toward the parking of what's on the site, in which case that would be reserved for the businesses and, or at least the businesses during certain hours. And the parking on site would be for the residents and maybe staff, if there's, depending upon what the uses are. There are a lot of moving pieces here, and we can take advantage of how we move them and when we allow them to move during the course of the day. It's
The truth of the matter is, Leslie, there's no perfect solution to this. If you came up with it, you shouldn't stay here in Groton, you should work somewhere. And actually, I mean, the parking problem is, it's. So just do your best with the input here, I would say, and, it's all really
at
good
some
points.
point, somebody is gonna come home late from working somewhere else. And they may have to park on, on Church Street or in one of the other parking lots on Thames Street or on Bridge Street. And anybody who's ever lived in the city knows what it's like to drive around blocks looking for a parking space so you can go to bed.
But this isn't
But we are.
that density
Exactly.
city.
Exactly. So forcing the whoever builds on the parcel to house their parking on their site.
It is, there's also, so I work on Thames Street and I have lunch at Paul's Pasta maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I walk Birdie up, I pick up my food, I walk Birdie back. So there's a lot of convenience, same thing on Groton Bank. If there's more restaurants down there, you walk down and enjoy them. We've done a good job of limiting building heights, so it's, so this is one of those kind of conversations that's designed to promote some economic development. So these issues, there's no golden answer to it, but I think there's been a lot of thoughtful discussion on this stuff. And we put pen to
Let me
paper.
push it forward
and
one
go.
more step and bring it back. I mean, I want these to be incremental conversations because this is where the rubber meets the road.
I'd love more places to walk to.
Sorry. I'm acutely aware of the issues within the city in terms of parking in the different neighborhoods. And let's take it one more step and we can map this stuff out as well and take a look at it. I think this is the kind of conversation that I love, where it's very realistic, with a dash of hope.
I just wanted to add one last thing, is that if we really did want to stop people from parking on streets everywhere, we can make the streets narrow and not have. So if the parking on the streets is an issue, well, they all can big cars. And you have to slow down, you have to slow down a lot. But I'm just saying that there are lots of problems that we're trying to solve with one conversation, which is really hard. And there are also lots of solutions, but I do think that is an issue that we want to solve. It's just a matter of,
So I'm gonna say one more thing, and that's that the Thames Street study actually envisioned that municipal parking lot.
Fair.
Up near the corner of Thames and Bridge. So, that was actually in one of their envisioned plans for how increase development of Thames Street was added. So for what that's worth.
so when I have big,
I just to go back to the dose of reality on that, I don't think that the. What we know and this is not just true of Groton, it's true of every municipality. Generally, municipalities are really bad at maintaining infrastructure. And buildings, it's just, that's not what they do best. I can tell you, I've tried, I know the mayor's tried. To get electric boat. To build a parking garage. And. They have reasons why they keep telling us that they can't or won't. But
40 million of them.
there, but one of the
Because that's how
problems
much,
is,
that's how many dollars it costs.
one of the problems is that we lost our. We lost our lever. On that. When the parking was approved by the state. Their parking was approved by the state for long term. That's going to be expiring. But. It was. You know, every time they come in and they want to build a new building, I'm looking at it. Very hard. That's where the. And I didn't have any leverage. For the last three buildings that we've done.
Because they meet the requirements, the regulations.
And state. So. I know where we have the. Power to do stuff, I know that we don't have the ability to exercise that power right now. If I build another building, I will look at this again.
Is there something we can add for, so again, trying to think outside of what we have, because what we have just, it's so hard to write the exact thing that works for every restaurant, right? So maybe very different from the sale maker came in before. Is there a way that we can distinguish user based, or I don't know how you would do that. But you know what I mean? If you're expecting a lot of people to bike or to walk, then you wouldn't need as much marketing. But if you know which you how many people are grabbing it, I don't know. I just don't think.
Well, we've talked before about, at this end of Thames Street, how idyllic it is to think that everybody's gonna leave their car at their apartment and walk, but they are every bit of a mile and a half from the gate. Maybe over 2 miles if they're working on the Columbia class, they have to go to the south end of the yard. And that's when they conceivably could get up early and go park in G lot and save them 1.75 miles. That's a tough ask in the middle of winter at Groton. So, we're working on, the walkability of Thames Street being a goal, but we have to face the reality of what people do these days. They get in their car and they drive a 1/2 mile apart, and
There's winter.
and right, and that's so I think we need the parcels to contain their own parking as much as we can. Otherwise, I think we're doing a disservice to the city.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think everybody, it's that.
It's just so
That's actually how it is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And in talks with electric boat over the years. And they have said, oh, well, people find places to park.
yeah, they do.
They do, that for other people's front lawns and. I think we all agree on what the problem is and that the solution that has been found is not acceptable. So. I agree that. Each parcel, each development needs to be able to. Hold their own parking requirements.
So you'll
I'll push
push,
The next iteration.
are you gonna come up with like some categories that we can work from and so
Yeah.
what goes where and, you know, because I mean, when I see from this list that's probably missing is the food and beverage and manufacturing and industrial. Because they're,
So remember that what this is for is only gonna be the GCR area. And it's unlikely that a large manufacturing space would go in.
so we're gonna have different, are we gonna have different parking, a different section of parking for those type of, for those type of uses, or are we gonna, you know, we're just gonna, we have one table for GCR and then other,
It may be that we're sort of doing a mini complete set of regulations for the GCR.
okay,
And we'll work our way over time. By
For the
neighborhood to,
other uses that,
yeah. Because I don't wanna put in regulations for. First of all, changing anything for manufacturing can't be done. We can't enforce that retroactively.
but understood, I'm just, you know, so I just
Right.
to clarify, so we're not gonna. We won't necessarily be addressing those kind of issues in this particular section of the regulations.
I'd like to keep this for
That
everybody's
is
sanity.
only uses that are permitted in the GCRs.
Yeah.
One more suggestion that might help prevent AUV problem in the future. All of these are based on space, as far as I can tell. They're based on, you've got dwellings, and then you have 1,000 square foot. I've seen a lot of zoning codes that go off of employees, which I know changes, but most people have an idea of their employees, and they can show that on tax. That's more like that, or tax. And that's how I see cities addressing that's more specific, especially when you have manufacturing, because you can have one or the other, you can have high density employees, or you can have just a plant that makes. So it's hard to base it just off.
Basing it off of the number of employees. I mean, obviously, with the number of employees that ED has, you cannot fit them. I don't care what you do. You are not going to fit them all in Groton City. And the fact that they have parking lots in other areas, how do you calculate that into, okay, you've got so many employees, so only half of them can park in the city?
Well, it depends on when you, like, if we're talking about it, we were completely new and they were coming in with their plans and they were saying, hey, they would be applying for a variance to count that parcel as their parking. And it would be the same kind of the off-street parking. How it would be right now. But if the zoning code required it to be based on employees and they had too many employees to fit what they thought was okay parking, they would probably have built a parking garage. Because that would be the big space.
With the cost of a parking garage, I think it's cheaper for them to ship the people out.
Right.
The buses.
Right, and
And
that's
that's what they're doing now, but it's
Exactly.
still the employees who don't want to be bothered to take that bus who are clogging up the streets in front of people's houses today. So.
I don't think that that changing the zoning in the GC zone is going to, it's not going to fix the EV problem. I do think that it's important that we, one, don't make it worse.
That's
Right.
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
okay.
And we can do that by requiring all required parking be on the site of whatever the development is.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the thing about EV parking is it colors everybody in the city's view parking, right? So because of the problems that you know, everyone's concerned about parking, whenever there's anything new. There's any new development, everyone's concerned about parking because every time EV builds a building, the problem gets worse, right? That's people's experience. That's their lived experience, so that's just that colors that colors.
I mean, the real answer, honestly, is mass transportation. And that unfortunately is
That's
not
not happening.
in the cards anytime really soon. There's some talk at the state about using a rail line, which would be great, but I don't know where that is right now, and you still need people to have a place to park. At the other end, you need to be able to incentivize taking the buses or taking, having EV put in a shuttle bus from the end of Main Street and Bridge Street and those developments to, there are ways to make it better. That zoning and regulations just aren't the right tool for. So I think we made this the best we can make it. And we have every parcel full of parking that it builds to. And then we keep fighting the good fight on everything else.
So, it's normal discussion for tonight. Does everybody understand the shared parking factor, or is that something we should walk through?
The explanation on the back is, yeah.
How about parking locations and private roadways? Is that, can we get into that?
Let me just-
Regulations.
Sort of give you a quick rundown of what this is. These are basically traffic configuration things like travel lane width, parking length, and the effective turning radius. The tighter a turning radius is, the slower a vehicle has to go to be able to take it safely. So where you have Ys, where you have where you have, the off ramps, the way that they take a much more gentle curve, you're gonna have your traffic going faster. So requiring that turning radius. These are on page 23. All of this is for private roadways, so these are the drives, the access ways on private property. This is not, we don't have the jurisdiction over public roads. Can influence it, but we don't have the jurisdiction. So these are all numbers that have been put together by, most of them are by NACTO, which is, they've actually done the numbers, they've done the studies, they've looked at, what is it? What's a safer curve to go at what speeds? So it's based upon, it's derived from the design speed, which is, talked about this before, there are two kinds of ways to measure speed. Design speed and posted speed. Posted speed is the sign that says 30-mile-an-hour zone and you get pulled over if you're going 41. That's the sign, that's the posted speed. The design speed is what the roadway tells you you feel safe traveling at. So if it's a straight road for 5 miles, you're gonna feel much safer going faster. Traffic will go faster. If it's a roadway with curves, if it has narrower or undulating widths of lanes or roadway, people will go slower. It's a combination of literally the math, the metrics that have been collected, and human psychology. So that's what these numbers are from. They are based upon that science.
So is this how do you use this in terms of the regulations?
So this, let's say somebody's building a development and they're putting in, let's say it's a fairly small site and they're gonna put in cluster, you know, a cottage fort where you have maybe a dozen cottages on a parcel. And they need an interior roadway to be able to circulate on that site. It's the part that's on that site, you look at it and you say, okay, well, this is a small site. This is where people will be walking. This is how it's designed. This is what we would. This is the speed limit that we would want people to go. And you literally say, okay, we don't want them to go more than 20 miles an hour because people are gonna be walking, be there with their pets, be there with their kids, you know, grandma's visiting. And okay, so the effective turning radius on any turns would be 5 to 10 feet.
Never getting a U-Haul in the back apartments.
And so you call based upon the width of the street.
You can't, we do have truck deliveries, you can do a code apron.
Yeah.
There's some,
There are workarounds of stuff.
But again, how do we tell the developer, well, we think that street should be a 20-mile-an-hour street,
We look at site plans all the time.
right?
And if somebody puts a site plan in where a roadway is 32 feet wide, that's really wide.
Yeah, but going to what Bob said, I don't know if it's worth our time to fret about that. Because if they're gonna want to make the best economic use of the site, they're not gonna put 32 foot wide, they're gonna reduce that to 16 feet. So that they can get 6 more units in there. But I mean, I don't know how much of a concern this really is. You may bring it down to suggesting that you move this building this way so that you have to curve around, that sort of thing, but I don't know how much fruit there is in us worrying about 8 or 9 feet width at this stage.
this will affect the driveway stuff, right? So the entrance to the building,
Sure.
so it'll affect the curb cuts and the sidewalks. Okay. So that might be something we want to control if we want that street safe.
Completely understand frontage and all that. I'm just saying, we're sitting here waxing about the lane width on interior private roadways. I don't know that there's any fruit there beyond the curb cut and the entrance. Because I think that's gonna work out organically.
I think it makes it more walkable. The interior of a project. You can also take a look at it with each project.
I would say I have that engineers who will add a factor of safety to these lane widths just to cover their butts instead of actually designing for a slower speed. So this protects some people. An owner might not know the difference between a 12-foot lane and a 9-foot. But we do, and engineers do, and we think this gives us something to refer to if we feel like they're going a little too much. Not to say we never have to say anything. They pick 35 miles an hour and but if they do choose 35 and we think that's wrong, it's gives us something.
So that's good, we might use it in a rate sense, put it in there, so it gives us, we wanna tell somebody we think that road needs to be that more narrow, that this gives us some basis for it.
Right, but how do we do that? We just set, maximum off road or off street speed. And let the rest work out by turn radius and width.
I think that you do it site by site and project by project.
But to have something to lean on as a guideline, if it's just a, suggestion, why would they have to
Well,
listen to us on that?
it's not a suggestion. When they're doing their roads, they should pick what their expected speed is. Right? And then that's where if we think the speed they picked doesn't match the design that they're giving us, or we think the speed they picked is too fast, either one of those options. Or too slow.
Well, that's what I mean. How are we going to express that?
Well, they show us a site plan that says this is a 25-mile-per-hour road, but they have 12-foot limits.
I got it. We can disagree with their calculation. I'm just saying, if they say, well, fine, if my road is too wide, then people might go 35. Well, how are we gonna tell if 35 is wrong? That's what I'm saying. We either restrict them to 8 foot wide passage with regulation, or we throw a maximum off-road speed. I'm just saying, right, you know, what pertains to this body, how do we tell them how to stay in, where are the boundaries?
Well, walkability would tell you it's less than 25 miles. Because death rates go up after 25 miles.
All good stuff. I'm just saying, how do you codify that?
Well, then should we like limit it to like, you know, limit these speeds on these roads? 'Cause, I mean, none of these parcels are big enough where people are gonna be driving 35 miles an hour on them, but, or should. But, right, but, you know, maybe we should, you know, we should limit it, should set it up so that there's limits of like. The maximum reasonable speed would be 25 miles an hour. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, right, that's what I'm saying. I think the way you do that is you say, you know, parcels in this zone for private off-road, you know, passage can only have a maximum speed of 20 miles an hour or something like that. And then let them design that in, you know, with extra wide sidewalks and narrow and, you know, let it do it. You know what I
So
mean?
we can
They'll
take
design
off.
it for that. I'm just saying, otherwise, this is a page of suggestions that they will wad up and throw on the floor and tell us how they're gonna do their site. It has no teeth. no
We've been
twig.
in a meeting. we can have a-
How does enforcement of speed limits work on private parcels? I mean,
The
there's
enforcement is the design,
Right.
it's not the post. That's the,
that
that's-
design parameters.
so if you want to. I mean, one way to do this is to say that they all. Have to be. 20 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour, and then you just take off the, for instance, in the top section under travel lane width, you just take out those bottom 2 rows.
Yeah.
Because regulations are what you have
It's
to do.
simple,
Right, yeah.
it's straightforward, and plus this is an area where we're not. It's a limited area, the city, we're not designing it to have speedways off road, so.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Are we regulating the travel lane bit? Or are we just putting a cap on the design speed of interior roads?
It's a safety
No,
issue,
you're
right?
regulating the.
Yeah,
I mean, we're, it's
lane.
basically, the reason why we have input on it is because it's a safety issue for cars in this area, so we're giving a cap.
I got you. That's what I'm saying. What is the regulation gonna say? Is it gonna say 8 feet, 9 feet, or is it gonna say 20 miles an hour? Off the city streets?
It should go with 18.
Yeah.
Because these are based on design, these are based on, the way that a driver will perceive the design speed, right?
I'm
So
on board with
that's
all that. That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying, we're getting to the meat of this.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
the-
yeah,
What are we putting in the black and white
right,
requirements?
right.
We are telling them 8 feet, 9 feet.
Yeah,
We know why we're saying
Yeah.
8 feet, 9 feet.
I like it.
I think that's the way we do it,
I like
8 feet,
that.
9 feet.
All right, so we're
We
gonna
know all the
take out-
reasons. We're talking about all the reasons. Are we requiring 8 feet or 9 feet? Or are we, and then.
Not to exceed 9 feet.
Done.
Yeah.
It's a good point, I think being specific there is helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's
Yeah.
no need for any.
And then the,
Yes. It is. Go to.
2 directions. If we're limiting it to 9 feet.
In each direction.
9 and 9.
Oh, yeah, okay, so thank you.
all right, what about the parking length and the effective turning radius would be? Is that something else we should be specifying or well?
I would say not to exceed 15 feet.
Yeah, I would go 10.
10.
And then if they have big delivery trucks, there's.
Not to exceed 10 feet.
We've got a 9 foot wide travel lane. We need to get emergency vehicles so we can allow parking under the wall.
The,
It won't include upstream. You're gonna have to go even wider if you want angled parking spaces to still allow a 9 foot travel lane.
we actually have diagrams and regulations in our current regulations
Right.
that show this.
Okay. Alright.
So,
I just wanna make sure we're clear about what's.
Yeah.
So if they wanna add parking, they have to add another 7 feet. For parallel parking.
Right.
On our 9 foot wide road.
I mean, a lot of regulations require 24-foot aisles on two-way parallel. Perpendicular, thank you, perpendicular parking. And those numbers are pretty standard. They're quite standard. And I did a design where there were trucks that were gonna come in and they didn't need more than the 18-foot width. They may have needed 12 feet. But the problem really was the turning radius to get in from the street. And they demonstrated how their trucks couldn't do it in 18 feet. And so what we did was we did 2 9-foot lanes that splayed and had just like a little rumble strip in the middle, and they would just go over that. And that was the point of it. So there are workarounds to all of this that are legitimate within these. Within transportation planning and traffic.
Internet just told me that the turning radius of a Toyota Camry is 18.7 feet.
At 50 miles an hour.
I like. It's been 30 months. Unfortunately.
Do we need to put the turning radius in black and white? We've got the travel lane, but we're working on the opening,
It's a
from the
big
street.
traffic. It's.
You're
gonna
talking about
keep
traffic on private property after we've gotten them past the frontage, which we want for city design purposes.
That's where the radius means most. Because that's what's gonna keep the curb cut the smallest.
I got you. I'm talking about past the curb, past the sidewalk. Why are we gonna
Safety and
regulate?
welfare.
Hmm?
Health, safety and welfare.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things too, you wanna have, I mean, I don't go to places where I don't feel comfortable parking my car and getting out, so if an owner is gonna invest and build and design a parking lot, that's. It's a one and done kind of visitation thing, so there is some market driven sort of limitations, but I think as long as we have the safety covered, we shouldn't get overly prescriptive. In how they're designing it, right?
So is this the kind of thing you see in regulations in other communities, effective turning radius, do they regulate that?
Done a lot more with the parking area dimensions and those I can verify. Similar throughout the states.
All right.
We can come back to this. I will do
Okay.
some research on it and. Listen, I'm happy.
Let's take 5 minutes.
Okay.
Everybody catch your breath.
Everybody have my phone number? Sent an email out. Keep that phone number. That's,
That's your preferred method of contact?
it is. That is my personal phone. It will always be on me. I not to give it out. But. If if you get locked out or if you need something. That'll be available. Open the door or say, yes, I'll look into it. But email is definitely the best, the very best way. Second best way is.
We,
Yeah, So, we're up to page 24.
Somebody just sent me that?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay. Just-
I sent you a thing about a newspaper article about, the Navy's building a parking garage at.
Newport News.
Newport News, yeah,
Hey. Imagine that.
so. Which will work. All right, let's see, so we're on page 24, location of parking. I mean, this is, so this is basically requiring all residential dwellings. Parking for all of them should be located in the same lot as well, that's what we're talking about, right? This is spaces, you know. For non-residential uses, again, on the same lot, within 500 feet. Industrial zones, we're not really talking about that, but. Well, I don't know if this is,
Is this whole parking section related only to the GCR section, or is it generic for the whole city?
That, what,
This entire 7.1 parking, is it?
right,
for-
right now, it's for the whole city. What I would like to do is to have. There's only so much chaos, I think we all. Feel it, so I would like to do this, I would like to write these just for the GCR zones, we can always add them. But before we change everything from the city. Without having done the same kind of homework that we've done in this area. I just don't think it would be responsible, right?
So my question is that for the industrial zone, that third bullet point, 7.1D. Is that necessary for this if it's only the GCR zones, because it's not industrial?
No, this is actually, even though it's marked as having been added, most of this is actually in our current regulations.
Great chance you could point out to us, you know, what isn't in our current regulations that you want uniquely to GCR, so we can look at that more specifically.
Yeah.
thought changes for the last 3 bullets.
I figured that might be a good place to
Well-
start, but I'm not sure. I don't understand.
I think all of this is for. Is what we have existing.
Okay.
Stuff with the front.
So we do require parking located either below grade or at least 20 feet beyond the front yards. So that's part of it.
That's new. Yes.
That's from the frontage, and also.
Mhm.
So, all those bullets seem good to me.
Do we need the third bullet?
The industrial zones one.
So, yeah,
Yeah, that's,
So. The second bullet says, on a lot within 500 feet. Fourth bullet says that lot's gotta be owned by the same folks who own the parcel that is the overflow parking.
they have to have a.
This is what we have now. Just like, what we could do is just have the lower 3. For the GCR. GC, under D, or under D, the last 3.
From the frontage, mask, and 20-foot, you know, it says that.
Yeah.
Well, we did on ones.
Plus the first 2, correct? parking spaces required located on this site
Yeah.
or lot.
Take out the industrial zone section.
Then I think we keep that word forward as well. Yeah, we don't need to get rid of the industrial zone bullet.
Well, we might want to clarify the fourth bullet to talk about non-residential use. Because if all residential parking is required on the same lot, then we should only be talking, you know what I mean? So the indentations there, land occupied and such land must be, those could probably go under the second bullet.
So we're taking out the first line of the fourth.
Just put those two sub-bullets under the second. And then the additions look good, right? On board. Size of spaces,
This is probably redundant.
from.
That's what it aligns. Oh,
Was, is the size of spaces, is it? How related to parking area dimensions?
those you should match. But,
So I will get those coordinated and make sure that they're not.
Like they might, be distilled down into one section.
Yeah.
Because it, I mean, it looks, just based on the font, it looks like it's already there and it's.
The provisions are compact and then oversized species. is common. So, agree with that.
All right, we're back to the, this is the. This is the table we.
All right, let's just take that out.
All right,
Like, there will only be one table.
7.1 G.
That first one answers your question about the setback.
Did you say you would allow like handicap parking in temporary living zones in the front yard setbacks?
The drop off and pick up and drop off with. Are. You know. You help me grab it out. Greater inside. 15-minute park spaces. And then. There could be spaces there.
Here we go into curb cuts specifically and access. Turn radiuses. So we've got a little. If the summary that we're looking at before will not apply to the original. Yes. The private roadway summary table. Are we going to align the general layout of requirements? That. Or because this
Yes.
is a few different numbers.
So we're gonna. Go back to the table we were looking at before where we took out the bottom two. and coordinate this with them. And remember, what you're looking at for the most part now is what we have for the entire city.
Turning radius.
Before the 10.
Well, this is. But access drives, aisle and living areas to be different.
Right, that's what, yeah. It's going to the 10 to 15.
Oh. Strips. It would just, sidewalks shouldn't have it, maybe, like, if they have to be. Oh, well, I guess if the front yard setback is 0, then. Or vehicles look at it just the sidewalks, fences, walls.
Thing that might go here is requirements for sidewalks along budget fields. Do we have? Okay.
There. We get a lot of funding for sidewalks from the town. The budgets go like this for sidewalks and roadways. And there has been a limit on the width of sidewalks of 4 feet. Yeah. For money reasons. To try and get sidewalks to extend as many linear feet as possible around the city. Sidewalks are also only put generally on one side of the street. These are all things that are political issues more than zoning regulation issues, so.
Well, I've seen it done where in zoning codes, if they any side that abuts public right of way must have sidewalk. Basically.
And make it development.
Yeah. And it's depending on the dollar for the amount of that constructed. You're building highways, sidewalks.
And we saw that, we write it that way.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to run it through the highway department and the mayor, just to make sure that it's. I know what I have been told, I know the way we've done it, always done it, I'm not saying that it's the best way. But it may be the best way for other reasons that I'm not aware of. All I can say is it has not been a smooth conversation. There's always a reason why it's. Portraits, wide sidewalks are not the most ideal for pedestrian friendly. Areas, not just leave it at that.
Well, I mean, so that's where we can, you know, if it's a requirement of the developer, then we can. Make the sidewalk requirement, whatever we think it should be, right?
If you have a 4-foot sidewalk. And then you have the sidewalk, we're not gonna make that sidewalk 5 feet.
Well, Reddit, there's an existing sidewalk, you could do it, or you could say abutting sidewalks have to be in, like, say downtown Groton, they require you to build the sidewalk to 50 wide. But they really want pedestrian friendly areas.
So if you've got a small one, a big one and a small one.
No, it would just be the one.
Then you
Oh, I mean, you're talking about as you're walking. Yes, yeah, they get bigger and then usually where they're bigger, you may have a street tree or just.
We have that on Main Street. We have lots of telephone poles that narrow our spaces, so it's not a.
That is, that does pose a problem.
It's not an unusual. Construction, but we both can make it. I'm with you.
All right, 71H, loading spaces.
You know, so we don't list out so many buildings, so many different uses, but we just make it any building that requires or any. Property that requires outside delivery of materials, probably get rid of that long list.
Tell me what I'm right. We're at the bottom of 28.
No, sorry, 7.1.h,
Loading spaces.
instead of saying. Every hospital, institution, hotel, et cetera. Something like. Every building, from which outside deliveries, I don't know. That'd be good for you.
Just replace all of that with them. And then.
Every building requiring.
Or from which every building from which outside deliveries of materials, yeah. That's- It's 9 o'clock, so I don't think I can come up with that sentence, but I'm sure someone can.
I think it's still in the running for longest run on sentence.
That's right on.
That's a tight race, actually.
The shell.
After regulations capitalized.
Check that in.
Okay. Truck trailer, we're good on 71H. Anybody else, comments? Jason?
I think you should round up that one. Fractions, including.
71I,
What's a tractor? If it's not part of a tractor.
well, it could be just a trailer. Right, just
Yeah,
yeah, just the.
so not a
Just a-
track.
You could
Probably,
probably,
no, they, just the tractor of a tractor trailer.
you could probably get rid of all that, just say, no truck and/or trailer. Loaded with merchandise. Unless you want to list all accommodations of box trucks, over the cab,
But,
you know,
but by putting it this way, does that eliminate, like, if you just have a small pickup truck?
Right.
That doesn't pertain to this.
This is a hinge on the loaded with merchandise.
Right.
I shouldn't bring my truck. Merchandise.
I do help from Costco.
Every 7 days. And preventing my own.
Yes.
it is kind of, with all the other things that we are specifying, it is kind of weird to have this here. Except that it might be, if you're like parking in a loading zone. That also restricts. Traffic in some way, like a temporary loading zone.
Yes.
This almost seems to try to uphold the temporary loading zone, only allows you to be parked there for 6 days. So,
Well,
you know what I mean, like, why is this here?
my guess is they said you want a certain business on Bay Street, they used to have tractor trailers in the parking lot.
That's how the sausage gets made. And
If I had to guess.
So could we add a bullet under loading spaces? Or do we already have that? Just to say, like, yeah. Well, you know,
Well, I'm just thinking of like, if mixed use, part of their business is distributing stuff, they first floor, they bake all the donuts and then they box truck it and they send it out. And above there are apartments. They've got a box truck that sits there all week and then, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, this just seems so weirdly specific and restrictive. Loaded with merchandise. So I can leave it there indefinitely if it doesn't have any merchandise in it.
yeah, this is. These regulations are filled with things like this that make me crazy. So. Anything you all want to do to make this better, including deleting it, I am fine. Because honestly, who's gonna check to see if it's got merchandise in it? And does that really matter? What matters is whether there's a truck or a.
Well, but I mean, you could have businesses in the commercial zone that have trucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you can't prohibit them from parking.
We do, think of the auto part
Right,
distributor,
well,
they've
yeah,
got a
well,
dozen little trucks parked
yeah.
down there.
That's what I mean, it's a common thing. So, I mean, I don't. I'm not sure why it's in here, but I think it's big problem.
Yep. All right, I just
It's-
put fix or delete.
Okay. Apply your professional judgment. 7.1J. Lighting and landscaping requirements, do all those for parking,
And just put 7 on.
parking in loading areas. Last page.
They were durable dust on some. Can't use gravel parking to satisfy. Surface requirement.
right, but you still could. So could you done from the.
Right.
But that's,
Grass paper, so.
yes.
That first bullet point is even considering to me. The fact that all weather surface must be to the satisfaction of the planning, zoning commission, or the zoning and building official. I just think that leaves a lot. What the satisfaction is, no specification of that. So one commission may say this looks good, and the same thing can come through a different commission that they say it looks bad.
Well, no, I think it, when Leslie says. This, because that. Makes it more of a site specific. Which can work in one area, but not necessarily be good for another area. So unless it says that's good for your location. And I could be totally wrong.
It does give a lot of power.
Yeah, that's my only concern.
Well, so it would be, I mean. Is there another way to do that? Say that makes it less subjective. right, because that's a,
It's almost unnecessary given the other bullets.
Yeah,
Well, it's gotta be, durable dustless, blah, 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 it's gotta be. If it's, the grade exceeds 10%, it's gotta be paid, I mean, I think it's covered without saying,
because it says they have to be stable, durable, dustless, and graded. Training. That would be,
that would be our
that would
satisfaction.
be the satisfaction.
We're not looking at you. That's the first one.
I mean, staying within the boundaries of all of these regulations is to the satisfaction of,
right.
Right. So I would suggest either take it down out or just put it with the satisfaction of regulation. Just take out the first bullet.
off-street parking and loading areas, including driveways. Shall be,
Right,
that's,
yeah, I mean, I think you need the introductory words here.
the surface of shall be stable, durable.
Challenge, shall include all weather surface. It shall be,
I think I would take big things,
Right.
When you say you're paying big bucks, there's no paid big bucks.
Okay.
Is this why, we need to change that. They have to earn their money. They have to put staff.
We have a technology campus, so
IT and TC are advisor and
Which we probably don't need to include in this, right?
Yep.
What about one section, what's it by the highway, was where do we? TC. So it's TC. TC. Or,
but it's not anymore, yeah. All right, I can go through these, it's late for everybody.
Right.
But I really appreciate everybody's comments and concerns and ideas and solutions.
yeah, that's good discussion, folks, I appreciate all the input and the comments. So next item is report of commission, anybody have anything? I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Streeter and Mr. Rice for their, for serving as commissioners. And thank them for their input and their time.
Absolutely.
Any public communications, Wilson?
So, during yesterday's mayor and council, the council approved, me to basically bring an amendment request to the plan of conservation and development to this group. So I'm looking to adopt by reference the 2022 City of Groton Community Resiliency Plan into the plan of conservation and development, and that is within section 6.1, which is prepare for climate change. So the development of the plan itself, the objective items that were kind of identified within it, also like all of our capacity building work, everything that has led up to developing more resilience projects for the city, and that being the focus is what we would like to update. I'll be bringing I'll be submitting a formal application, and we'll have further discussion, and that will also be the public hearing. Yes.
Okay, good. Anything else? Staff, board of staff. Those that works theirs, Leslie, anything?
I think so.
Okay. No executive session. So, sorry, motion to adjourn.
Motion to-
of the city.
I'm Richard Return.
All right, motion by Mr. James, second by Ms. Bergeron. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, okay. 600, and we are adjourned at 9:15.
We have dedicated IT instead of.
Thank you all.